Greetings, everyone! It's I, Tentus Dracovin, your Lord and Emperor here at the Dracovin Empire, and welcome once more. We're going to be discussing tabletop and going over things from the Pathfinder role-playing world of Golarion. If you've not joined me before, hey, welcome! Hopefully you're either joining me on Twitch or later on YouTube after this has been recorded for there. So, hey Twitch, always good to see you. Follow will be really nice. And of course, if you're joining me on YouTube later on, hey YouTube, also good to see you also. Also, so double alsos there. English. A subscription, like, ringing the bell, you know, all those are great. But regardless of where you're joining me, my question today is, have you played an Oread? That's what we're talking about today. Another of the Geniekin. We're talking about those that are connected with Earth itself. The Oreads. Alright, why don't we dive into this? And I usually shout out a number of books if you want to do some research on your own. I always recommend checking out things like the Archives of Nethys, the Pathfinder Wiki, PSFR D20. All of those have a lot of information. More the archives or the wiki are where kind of my information stems from. But these books also will help you out if you want to check them out. I'll put myself over the corner here. Anyway, there are 3 books that I can kind of... that I can shout out here for the Oread. From Pathfinder 1st Edition, the Advanced Race Guide is your best bet for a lot of the mechanics and some of the setup for how they work within the Pathfinder world. Also, Blood of the Elements is another one. Smaller book, but very similar, that they're kind of giving you a setup. For the 2nd Edition Pathfinder information, Rage of Elements, it's the newest book. Gives you a lot of bit of information. It kind of expands upon Geniekin in a lot of way, and develops them in a much more interesting way for their own kind of thing. I definitely recommend that this is the best of the books right now for how the setup works for them. How lore has developed. Lore doesn't tend to contradict itself, it kind of tends to evolve. But anyway, we should talk about Oreads, as shown here. Because they are an interesting one. As I said, they're connected to elemental Earth. And they are descended from a union between a mortal humanoid of some kind and something that is, well, Earth-based. Jabalis are oftentimes the most common of the elemental Earth-based creatures that end up with humans. They are one of the genies, hence why Geniekins, but they aren't the only beings that could result in a birth of an Oread. They just are the ones that are most common. Now, Oreads themselves tends to be stout, stony hair, skin of earthen colors. There are those that show their elemental heritage even more explicitly with shining skin, rocky outcroppings on their bodies, glowing eyes, crystalline hair. Despite all of these things, it is very important to note that Oreads are still creatures of flesh and blood. So, this earth that's on them or displayed on them, that's showing on them, might be little hints of that elemental nature, but deep inside it's still flesh, still blood. Many of them wear practical clothing or simple adornments over complex jewelry, but some of them will go for that depending on the circumstances they're in. When an Oread tends to become an adventurer, well, depending on their situation, most and many are kind of drawn to divine magic, in fact. Not all of them, certainly. But divine magic does kind of, and the natural world does draw them in. Things like druids and rangers are quite common, and many druid Oreads following the Stone Order. But also you will find religious ones that are going to be clerics. Then they'll worship an elemental lord of earth, or the dwarven god of Torag, or even just to follow the general elemental deity, the Green Path, or the Green Faith. Again, there is a draw to that for their nature in a lot of their ways, but individually they can go different directions. So, your average Oread are usually the union of humans and Jabalis. Rarely, though, Earth Mephits and Zorns can have a union with a humanoid. They can also, in another rare circumstance, come into being when just normal parents mingle with elemental earth energies through various ways. If you are exposed to massive amounts of earth energy from the earth plane, one of your children could be Oread. It could just express itself that way. There's earth energy now in you. Oreads usually grow up among humans and are raised according to human customs. They are born from humans or other humanoids. Again, humans are the most likely humanoid for Oreads, but you could be from other ones. But regardless, wherever you come from, you're in the society that you were born into. Many live their life at their own pace. They have trouble adapting to urban life. Many live as hermits, study in mountain peaks within caves. City-dwelling ones will sometimes have difficulty finding a job. You can take advantage of some of their bigger size and strength, working as a guard or a mercenary. Others will find themselves as merchants and farmers. But again, this idea of solitary learning also kind of, and reflection on the nature of things does come into them. Remember, that reflection comes into adventurers with druids and rangers and clerics. But also you'll find that there's a tranquil love of libraries and academies, and some will become bookkeepers or scholars. An interesting thing is, though they are connected with Earth, they don't like deserts. A lot of them prefer a bit more stability and routine rather than the shifting dunes. It's the idea... part of the boulder very much works with... You know, if that boulder is infused with the elemental powers of Earth, then yes. Yes, it will. It's the idea that deserts, though they are very Earth-based, are very chaotic, and the nature of the elemental plane of Earth is very stable. Oreads that migrate from the basic material plane to the elemental plane of Earth usually live in scattered small communities or with others in larger cities. They do mix with the creatures of the elemental plane, but very similar to back on the material plane. They're not really at home even in the elemental plane. It's this problem that they are of two worlds still, and it makes them never truly feel at home. There are those that will work as diplomats between Jabalis and Zorns and other creatures, but as much as that's a dangerous jobs, you know, they could accidentally insult their host, is a job they're kind of accepted into in a little ways. If a Oread finds themselves on the plane of fire, they can get extra scrutiny, as there's a conflict between the Ifritis and the Jabali progenitors that live there. So, yeah. Elemental plane of fire is a little more difficult to be in. Not impossible, but a little bit more difficult. So, generally speaking, your average Oread will be very calm and contemplative. It's the nature of Earth that's infusing into them. But when they get roused to rage, it's pretty intense. It's not easy to rouse one to anger, but when you do, they just kind of unleash it all at once. They can be very protective of their friends, but most really don't tend to have concern for the world's good as a whole. It's that contemplative nature that tends to infuse most of them, that kind of you reflect upon the overall world in the long term rather than the short term and improvements. Many are conservative and rarely like disruptions on their daily life. Its stability is an important thing. It matches with their elemental nature, the nature of Earth element. And you kind of can see that it, you know, there are certain flexibilities within a personality, certainly, and upbringing and things like that. But some of this basic nature is from where they come from. No matter if they have found themselves secluded or in an urban environment, usually by middle age, Oreads will find a pull to somewhere far away. This pilgrimage varies from Oread to Oread. Usually it's a place of great magic, splendor, or learning that they might be familiar with. Some are drawn in blind directions just to discover what's at the end of the path. Ords also have a lot in common with dwarfs and actually have a sense of kinship with other half-humanoid races. They have respect for the studious and devotions of Empyreans and elves. They usually don't really have a lot of friends, but they also have no enemies, especially among other Geniekin. Gnomes are a little weird to them, and halflings, cambions, and humans themselves can be brash and excitable. Again, it's the thing is, most of them are descended from humans, but still in human nature is very tapered down by their elemental nature. When they do become adventurers, like I mentioned earlier, those tend to be the younger Oreds. They want to see the measure of the planet's width and breadth, the Earth physically, you know, the land's width and breadth. Not Golarion's the planet name. Anyway, normally they set themselves a goal because they want to justify why they're adventuring, because peril for peril's sake is not something they want. But again, that's another interesting thing, because they are adaptable and they like to have this kind of stability. In a weird way, once they're accustomed to adventuring, that's what they're used to, and they'll continue doing it. It's sort of like they need an excuse to get themselves started. But, oh, now this is just what I do. I don't want to change what I do. I'm an adventurer. You know? They can they can work for the venturing parties as mercenaries, but definitely plenty of them are willing to work without pay if the alignment matches their own. So, I mentioned how there is this pull to the divine and the ideas of contemplativeness, the understanding, that kind of thing. It matches with things like, you know, druids, rangers, clerics. But when we talk religion as a whole, a lot of Oread religious life tends to be towards that quiet contemplation. Things like monasteries can be very important to them. So even if you are a Oread that takes the route of a cleric, that more adventurous type of class, you still might not be that adventuring. Many worship Iori, Abadar, as I mentioned, Torag. And this is for those that have found religious contemplation as a part of thing, but aren't going into adventuring. Because you do have those that go into a religious path that isn't something like a cleric, that would be more adventuring. And again, depends, some of them grew up with dwarfs. Remember, it's a humanoid. Dwarfs are in a situation they can be exposed to elemental energies or elemental earth creatures a lot more than your average humanoid, other humanoid. But does it mean you get a lot of them? So, yeah. There are some that venerate Imbrex, believing it to the Earth's creator, and if there are those that seek power, they may be attracted to the elemental lord Azuriel. There's a possibility. Alright, we'll talk about a few variants of Oreds as we finish up today. And a little bit on where you'd find them necessarily on Golarion. So they're the gem souls, or the crystal Oreds. They're colorful, faceted glowing skin, pupilless eyes, crystalline hair. They prefer bright clothes. Some get complex branching tattoos. They're more prideful and attention-seeking than your average Oread. A lot of them are attracted to artistic pursuits, flashy performances, symmetric poetry. There's still that little bit of order with the symmetric poetry. And they'll find themselves trying to live in nations that appreciate beauty or allow them to make meaningful personal contributions. Iron souls, or metal Oreds, have a metallic sheen to their skin, usually colored gold or silver, copper, green, dull gray. They seek to improve themselves through struggle. They work best in formal environments, but prefer to live in places that reflect deliberate growth. So it's sort of like a slow, methodical, deliberate growth. They're not necessarily looking to not have a challenge, but they want that challenge to be understood and be something that they can overcome in order to grow themselves. They oftentimes will undertake great physical projects without waver. They do have a little bit of resemblance to other metal-based creatures, androids, amphites, even Taloses to a degree, but their bodies are much more organic and seamless than constructed, and they have these earthen features that Taloses themselves lack. I'll talk about Talos in a future episode. Those are the Geniekin of plane of metal. Mire Soul are connected to the denizens that border the plane of water from the plane of earth. They've got mud, clay, reflecting that bond a little bit. And of course, dust souls are like dust and dirt, soil or field, hot desert sands. They can sustain on dirt and ash. They're deeper connected with something like... They're the Oreads that would be more desert-based. So, of course, Kellish. Kellish is the largest home of Oread population in Golarion. When we talk about Geniekin, we can't get away without talking about how Kellish and their genie basically capturing. A lot of them have migrated to Jamere, though, because the island has its renowned monasteries for a very contemplative atmosphere. There are those that make it their permanent homes. Many that are born without Jabari parents have been born to dwarfs near Yanderhof, influence of Crystal Rock. There have also been born to parents who previously ventured to the Perch Refuge or in search of the crystal womb of Orv. There have also been reported Oread births during the Kamishan storms in Orison, and they will work as guides or interpreters for caravans crossing the deserts. They'd be more dust souls. But that's Oreads. There is some things that, you know, with the Pathfinder 2nd Edition Remaster project, we are trying to reflect the updates to the entire, you know, system of things. And I think most of that's in place now, so these videos here should take into account the way that the remaster has altered some of the lore, refined some of the lore. Oread are a interesting one, that they are... No, that didn't pop me back up. Should have been... There we go. They are earth. They are rock. They are dirt. They are, well, connected to something major in the world. And perhaps more than many of the Geniekin, you can definitely see the influence on the way many of them act by their elemental nature. And even those that act differently, it's not because those urges of the elemental nature aren't there. There's a love of stability. You could have an Oread that still has this like urge for stability, but maybe because of the nature of themselves, their personality, maybe loves a little bit more danger. Gets themselves into adventuring. And once they're an adventurer, they want to stay an adventurer. The nature of that stability can be altered and brought about, can kind of be changed in a little bit. But again, it's this idea of contemplating, calm. Doesn't mean they can't have emotions, but it takes a lot to draw out some of their more deeper emotions, and they then tend to remain calm in most circumstances. The idea that many of them, similar to the idea of the rock that sits there for 1,000 years, contemplate stuff. They can quietly think of things, understand the universe, dive into the secrets of the cosmos, of nature itself. This draws Oreads in so many different ways. And these natures are what kind of give you an idea of what it means to be an Oread. And again, individuals are individuals. It's just that, just like anything, there's a natural instinct to things, a natural reaction. And they have this natural reaction that is made by one of their major elements. Earth, rock, ground. The element that is Earth. And none of them can really escape that, because it's in their blood. Whether they are born from an elemental creature, a Jabali, a Mephit, a Zorn, whether it's something was brought about because of an exposure from their parents, or something else. There is that elemental nature. They are still mortal beings, but like any Geniekin, they walk a line that is very difficult to walk, because they are in two very different worlds. A creature of flesh, but a creature of earth at the same time. Anyway, that'll be it for this chat on Oreads. Perhaps, again, like many videos here, I've kind of may revisit if necessary with things with the update projects and stuff, but probably we won't have to worry about it too much. I hope you enjoyed. Remember, I'm up on Twitch, and you can check all these videos that are tabletop related up on YouTube, usually a couple days later. If you're joining me on Twitch, it's Tuesdays, Thursdays, early afternoon, usually between 1 or 2, depending on life schedule. I've been sick lately, so the life schedule is a little later. And Sundays, late morning, usually around 11. Crimson Queen, my live Pathfinder First Edition show, TTRPG. Wednesdays at 9 p.m. Discussing tabletop, my tabletop discussion shows, Saturday at 6 p.m. All EST, Eastern Standard Time. And if you want to check me out, of course, on YouTube, go ahead later on. Great ways to support there. I said all the things earlier. I have social medias, Twitch and Discord. And, yeah. I'm sorry, Twitter and Discord. I said Twitch and Discord. You can always check me out on Twitch if you're on YouTube, or YouTube if you're on Twitch. I support that. Anyway, I'm going to get running. I thank you all out there. Until next time we talk about another Geniekin, another ancestry, something else related to Golarion or Pathfinder world, I bid you a farewell.